Warning, this video is one massive spoiler for Hazbin Hotel Season 1. Watch with caution, but also please watch it. The Christian concept of hell is frequently used as a metaphor in fiction and a simile in everyday life. The general meaning of it is an experience or situation that's deeply unpleasant and hard to escape from. In language, it appears in phrases like hell on earth or going through hell, while in fiction it often embodies a sort of brutal justice, lending weight to one's actions in life and thereby imposing morality on a chaotic world. Take, for example, Neil Gaiman's Sandman, where it is either implied or directly alluded to, I don't remember, that most of the damned in hell are there because they believe they should be. In Hazbin Hotel, a 2024 animated series created by Vivienne Medrano and published by the new worst guy in the world, hell is your worst day. The series follows Charlie Morningstar, the plucky and anxiety-riddled princess of hell, as she and her girlfriend Vaggie lead a rehab center for sinners with the hopes of getting them accepted into heaven. This is done both for its own altruistic sake, but also with the aim of reducing hell's overall population to prevent the yearly state-sponsored extermination of demons and sinners by hordes of monochromatic angels. Among her merry band of fuck-ups is the presumably gay porn star Angel Dust, notable for being addicted to not the drug he's named after, depressed alcoholic Catboy Husk, and escaped Maxwell Adams' character Serpentious. And it is real fucking good. I wouldn't say it's perfect. While the text does take a rather unflinching look at the horrendous reality of abuse and what addiction can do to a person, it has a tendency to set and forget, establishing everyone's damage, having them face it, then moving on without much further examination, and by the end of episode 5, it had covered so much ground and was careening into what felt like an ideal season 1 finale that I almost felt like the whole rehab plotline had been dropped in favor of a wider scale conflict between heaven and hell. And then, I watched episode 6 and got to the song You Didn't Know, and one sentence reached through my ears into my skull and rewired my entire brain, because the show didn't drop shit, it just shifted its weight onto metaphors and started communicating its most emotional beats through music instead of strict diegesis. You know, like a fucking musical. More precisely, the metaphor at work operates on two distinct but related levels, the systemic oppression level and the recovery sucks level. Different parts of the song work differently on different levels, but most of them can be tied into both, and that either means that this series' music is really well crafted, or that I should read a lot more Marxist literature than I do. Probably both. So, to properly get you where I got, I'm going to break this song down piece by piece, covering the messages and metaphors present in each bit. To set the scene, the entirety of the convened angelic court has just watched in a giant unquestioned crystal ball as Angel Dust dragged himself away from a potential night of debauchery to keep best girl Nifty from getting herself hurt, in trouble, or killed, going so far as to stand up to his polymethod abuser Valentino on her behalf. But despite Angel Dust overcoming threats to every individual aspect of his personal recovery and meeting the arbitrary and childish standards set by Adam, the first human in heaven, the High Judge Sarah is disinclined to accept that Angel Dust has truly changed, or at least that his change means anything. This is where it's not her daughter, I don't think, but the other smaller seraph, Emily, speaks up to start the song.
But she was right, Sarah.
Emily laments that Angel Dust, who I will continue to call by his full stage name to avoid confusion, met every requirement set out and ostensibly did everything right. He passed the test, but heaven isn't holding up their end of the bargain. Sarah tries to placate her with a classic. You don't understand. This is a complicated situation. Everyone who has ever tried to hold a Democratic politician accountable has heard this line, and it's kinda the only one Sarah has, as she reiterates it when Charlie also joins in. And that's the first lesson, the original metaphor. Power doesn't give a shit about you. The establishment will let you down. Politicians don't have your best interest at heart. The system will not help you, and nobody in it will tell you why. You can do everything right and still end up getting evicted from your apartment in the middle of a global cataclysm. But as it pertains to the redemption and recovery layer, it's also a haunting reminder that no matter how much you improve, some people will always see you as your worst day. Once you're an addict or crazy or a pervert, you're that forever, and no amount of work you do will ever change how they see and treat you. And as one small final note here, we have the subtlety of Vaggie trying to hold Charlie back as she begins her lines. Throughout the series, Vaggie's sarcasm and generally serious demeanor has served as an anchor for Charlie's flighty, anxious bullshit, so on the one hand, it makes total sense for her to try to talk her girlfriend down from talking shit to a seraph's face in front of like 16 other angels, at least some of whom are first fear. Don't think I didn't notice those Aphanim in the crowd, Vizzy. I got your fucking number, girl. We have the same bookshelf, motherfucker. But with the episode's earlier revelation that Vagatha herself is actually an angel, and a very recently fallen one, this and other warnings take on a different tone. Oppressed people cannot rely on the privileged for support. At some point, we can always turn around and go home, in a way the ones being targeted can't. My instinct here is to go into some defensive "that doesn't mean she doesn't care" thing, but honestly I'm too fucking sick of moderates to become one for the sake of some hypothetical viewers. Turning away from the pain of others is just a thing we all do, if for no other reason than it's just impossible to carry everyone's problems and keep walking forward. Vaggie is not a bad person for trying to keep Charlie cool, but there is a layer on which she doesn't realize Charlie can't afford reason when faced with the irrational. Anyway, then the guitars hit and Lutz starts vomiting homophobic judgments into the arena.
What are we even talking about? Some crack or who fucked up already?
Ever notice how 100 people picket a Planned Parenthood and it's the only thing on the news, and then 10,000 hold an anti-gun rally and you only hear about it from Twitter? Our media and political systems always make the shittiest and most extreme voices the loudest, and that's what these D-bags are. Lute and Adam are, within the systemic oppression metaphor, the alt-right. They're the voice of hate and intolerance, far outnumbered in reality, but yelling loud enough and loving the status quo hard enough that the actual hand of power, in this case Sarah, bends to their demands without resistance. They're also cops. Just saying. Before the club scene, Adam and Lute insist that Angel Dust is incapable of redemption or change, invoking his status as a sex worker as proof that he will always choose the low road. Once they see him not do that, the goalposts shift. He already had his chance and he fucked it up. The system is done with him. Obviously he deserves to be in hell, or he wouldn't be in hell. Honestly, this one works basically the same on both levels. Whether it's poverty, addiction, abuse, racism, mental illness, chronic physical illness, what fuck the ever has its foot on your throat, someone is gonna be there to blame you for it, and that person is gonna be called to testify in Congress about you before you are. This is maybe not a great video to make for my mental health, but it's been weirdly cathartic so far, so I'm gonna continue. It's also worth mentioning that one of Lute's primary character traits so far is homophobia. She doesn't have many lines this season, but one of them is referring to Charlie and Vaggie's relationship as vile and blasphemous. And in this song, she refers to Angel Dust as having, quote, blew his shot like the cocks in his mouth. Sorry, I have to laugh at this shit or I just become a septic ball of fury. While either one of these lines is explainable in other ways, none of those ways reflects well on her, and taken together, it paints an uncharitable picture. Whether phobically or not, Lute dragging Angel's orientation into things is sudden and jarring. Considering how much of a non-factor that element is in hell, her invoking it in heaven feels like an active attempt at character assassination, at othering him. She doesn't outright say that his banging dudes is why he's in hell, she just sets those facts next to each other and lets the association speak for itself. Between his status as a sex worker and his flagrant defiance of heterosexuality, both things the establishment traditionally considers negative qualities and frequently criminalizes, Angel Dust's perceived deviance is enough to render him, in their eyes, self-evidently unworthy of heaven or a second chance. I mean, did you forget that hell is forever?
Let me get this straight. You go down there and kill those poor souls. You didn't know. Whoops.
So Adam lets slip about the extermination, and Emily flips. She flies around the room demanding accountability from Adam, Lute, and Sarah, but all she gets is that same old non-answer. You don't understand. It's complicated. This was not an easy decision. This moment, this is huge. We, the audience, learned less than 22 minutes ago that the extermination was a secret, and now the entirety of heaven has had this seemingly pointless tradition of cruel violence shoved in their face or face equivalent anatomy. There is no coming back from this. This is Ferguson for angels. And that's in every way, more or less. The angelic court is now split, obligatory mention of the phrase trouble in paradise, and Emily stands up as the voice of the righteously angered. In a swelling key change, she condemns Sarah as a hypocrite and herself for believing the lie. Charlie, who has been subject to this pain for years, steps forward in assent, and the two clasp hands to stand defiant before the arbiters of power. This is, to carry on the cultural reference, the Black Lives Matter movement, the privileged and the oppressed joining forces to try and pry justice from the hands of power. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know enough about addiction or abuse recovery to know if this is an applicable moment to that layer of the metaphor. I do know a few people, myself included, who kind of lost their shit when they learned the reality of disability infrastructure in the States, though. There is more to say here about the invisibility of privilege and how the system engenders trust by lying to you and itself about the suffering it causes, but if you've made it this far, you don't need to hear that shit from me. I'm just going to point out how when Sarah refers to doing what was required, you see the literal fires of hell in her eyes, and then we're going to move on to the moment that recalibrated my entire cognitive equilibrium.
If hell is forever, then heaven must be a lie.
Emily.
For me, the themes of the season culminate here. This song, this phrase, this exact line, the music shifts to staccato bursts over a military drum line, punctuating rather than risk distracting from a single word. Charlie and Sarah, united in purpose, in feeling, in melody, take the highest, most central point that they can reach and scream defiant challenge to the heavenly host before them with a line that I truly believe to be the crystallized thesis of Hazbin Hotel. If hell is forever, then heaven must be a lie. From a craft perspective, this sequence is basically perfect. The melody is a reprise of Hell is Forever, the show's primordial statement of oppression, now being wielded against the very jackass who introduced it. The camera remains focused on Charlie and Emily, barely sparing a glance for Sarah or Adam's reactions. For the first two lines, the camera views them from slightly below, implicitly granting them power and authority. Once that ends, they are instead shown advancing, slashing their hands through the air. They're no longer simply pleading their case, but marching for it, and making good headway. When the camera finally does pull away from them, it's only because they no longer want the spotlight, as they show the court and the viewers the unflinching reality of the atrocities under discussion. And after this moment of defiance, the song is basically over. A glorified outro provides a dire plot advancement, but this moment, this stanza, is the musical and emotional climax, and it all hinges around that one line. I thought about that line over and over again. I repeated it to myself countless times. I took it apart, put it back together, compared it to other songs from the show until finally it clicked, and I saw how this line and its implications reached across every second of the text. Genuine mantra shit, like for real Chaos Magic vibes. I fucking love it. Hazbin Hotel starts with two very simple assertions. Hell sucks. Hell is forever. Your damage is forever. Your abuser, your addiction, your illness, that motherfucker's here to stay. Get used to it. You cannot advance. But here's the thing, that's not true. People get better. They get help, get away from bad situations, and go on to live healthy, fulfilling lives. So you have to ask, who's telling you that you can't escape? In my experience, the first answer is yourself. You believe things can't ever improve, that your problem can't ever be solved, and part of why you believe that is that your problem is telling you that. Abusers benefit from passive victims. Oppressive systems benefit from passive subjects. They need you to believe that you are weak and they are strong, because that way you won't try to fight back. And if you don't try to fight back, you won't realize where their actual power over you ends, and you won't be able to use that to get out. To some extent, though a less actively malicious one, the same is true of non-antagonistic situations like substance addiction or mental illness. The drive is to stay in the familiar state, subjugated by the unknown or uncorrectable triggers of your condition, and to never try to resist, either because resistance seems too hard or because compliance feels better. So that's hell, but what then, in the language of Hazbin Hotel, is heaven? Well, I think Adam says it best. This is heaven. We don't have rough days. If hell is a perpetual state of you at your worst, then heaven is you at your best. Your happiest, your healthiest, your most functional, your most attractive. But life ain't like that. Heaven may not have rough days, but people sure fucking do. So, shifting back to the text, we know from Vaggy's backstory, not to mention, Lucifer's, that someone in heaven can fall to hell. If we extend the metaphor while assuming what Adam claims to be correct, it means that once someone's in hell, i.e. at their lowest point, they can never leave that state. And that means that heaven should be a goddamn ghost town. Everyone has bad days, does bad shit, makes a fucking mistake, but if everyone is stuck perpetually at their worst, then nobody would ever be able to reach their best. There would be no souls in heaven. If hell is forever, then heaven must be a lie. Shifting exclusively to the recovery sucks layer, there is, to me, a deep profundity in this line specifically being a duet. See, for those of you who've never been through it, getting better is hard. Like really, really fucking hard. And if you're doing it for yourself, it's arguably way harder because if you lapse or give up, the only person you're disappointing is yourself, and that useless bitch already hates you, so what's there to lose? Like most things, recovery is easier with other people. If you can't get clean by yourself, maybe you can with a friend. If you can't get therapy for yourself, maybe a partner can help you. If you can't leave your bed to feed yourself, maybe you can to feed a pet.
If angels can do whatever and remain in the sky.
That's right, we're going line by line now. This is my channel, I get to choose the movie. Systemic oppression level. Most of the time, systems of power don't actually care about good or bad as actions that people do. They prefer to declare certain people or certain kinds of people to be good or bad and assume that everything they do then matches that label. Obviously, cops only do the right thing because they're cops. They're supposed to protect us. Clearly, the president wouldn't commit treason. He's the president. He has to have our best interests at heart. Pope Urban II declared complete absolution to anyone who died murdering Muslims during the First Crusade. Sir Lancelot was a self-pitying fuckboy. Gilgamesh was a dick. Ram doubts Sita no matter how many tests she passed and still becomes revered as a god. This is how structures of power work, and it's how they've always worked. On the recovery sucks level, most of the shit you have to recover from exists on an unwritten and unquestioned hierarchy. Shooting heroin is worse than snorting coke, is worse than smoking weed, is worse than drinking alcohol, and when any of these behaviors become a problem, the people with those problems are similarly tiered. Heroin, for instance, is automatically considered a problem because it's a poor person drug. Cocaine is a bit more nuanced. It's usually not considered great for anyone, but there's a difference in perception between celebrities snorting coke off a supermodel's abs through a rolled-up 100 and 4 dudes cutting lines with a credit card on their coffee table. As for weed and booze, well, the one that people kill their spouses on is the one that's legal in all 50 states. You judge for yourself how much sense that makes. Even here, though, we can see that same hierarchy of the perpetrator coming back. When rich people do something, it's fine. A little indiscretion, funny even. But when poor people do it, that's horrible. Jail the bastards. Because as one last fuck you, it is absurdly difficult to hold people in power or any other kind of designated good position to account for their actions. Consequences don't exist for the rich and powerful. The designated bad people go to hell, but angels can do whatever and remain in the sky. And that kind of blends into our next line.
The rules are shades of gray when you don't do as you say.
From a musical craft perspective, this line is a response to the corresponding line in the original Hell is Forever. The rules are black and white, there's no use in trying to fight it. Instead of being black and white, good people go to heaven, bad people go to hell, the characters have learned that the rules are, in fact, incomprehensible, and that nobody truly understands what dictates who ends up where. See above. Coke gets you rehab if you're a celebrity, and 1,000 years dungeon if you have a cracked phone screen. Systems of power run on hypocrisy, and people judge what you do based on where you are in the system. If you're one of the people declared good or desirable within the system, there will always be people falling over themselves to justify and defend every single thing you do. And a lot of those people will have control over whether or not you feel the consequences of those actions. Similarly, poor people trying to survive is the look at that bitch eating crackers of late capitalism. They're a prejudged group, and everything they do is criminalized and punished. The rules are not black and white, because not everybody is treated the same for their violation. When a cop has a mental breakdown, they get paid leave and health coverage and sympathetic editorials. When a person without housing has a mental breakdown, they get shot by a cop. And more often than not, that cop then keeps their job and sometimes get a paid vacation out of it. Fuck Lori Lightfoot.
When you make the wretched suffer just to kill them again.
Our economic system needs people at the bottom because that's how capitalism continues to function. And our society's sarcastic air quotes elites need those people at the bottom to fucking suffer because that's how late-stage capitalism continues to function. Whether it's high unemployment keeping wages down, whether it's police mass arresting people who are demanding accountability, whether it's forcing people out of housing and then punishing their unhoused status, whether it's fucking right-wing politicians stirring up bigotry and queerphobia in the lower middle class so that those people don't think about the actual reason their 9-to-5 no longer lets them afford both housing and food. Uncountable numbers of people are stuck in a hideous loop of systemically enforced misery so that they can live long enough to hope things might get slightly better. I mean, this exact thing you are watching right now is a desperate bid to break that exact cycle. And what's worse, there's kind of no metaphor here. As I've alluded to more times than I care to count, if you are low enough on the ladder, you can literally be killed with minimal consequence. For more details, look up the true crime concept of the less dead, or read a fucking news headline from the past 10 years. I could go on belaboring this point, but I really don't want to. This line functions near identically on both levels of metaphor, so rather than revel in misery, let's move on and try to recapture some of that manic passion that led to this script existing in the first place.
I was told not to trust in angels.
By her?
This sounds hollow coming from a white person with an upper middle class background, but ultimately, a lot of oppressed and disenfranchised people cannot rely on even the most well-intentioned of the privileged class to actually aid them. I've seen this from others acting around my queerness, and I've seen it in myself acting towards others. I've tried to correct it in myself. I am still trying. But ultimately, people experiencing desperate situations cannot rely on people experiencing comfort to make themselves uncomfortable for their benefit. People benefiting from the current system have no meaningful external incentive to change it, especially when faced with the possibility of ceasing to benefit from that system. It entirely comes down to an individual's sense of purpose and morality and how far those things can carry them. And inevitably, it will not carry them as far as necessity.
So things look bad and your back's against the wall.
So there you have it. That phrase is the denouement of the song, and from there it falls into more diegetic territory than metaphorically significant, at least for the metaphorical lenses I've been using. Though Vaggy's situation can also be taken as an implicit depiction of how quick any extremist belief is to excise the slightest bit of nuance from its ranks, and her status as an angel in hell is sort of a corollary to the broader message of you can always improve, saying instead that you can always get worse. Nobody is truly above a system like this, and anyone can fall from grace at a moment's notice, which is why this show's message is so important. Just like everyone can fall, everyone can get back up. No matter what your situation or how long you've been in it, you can always try to make things better. You're never too broken to be fixed, and the people who say you are lying to you. It may take time, and it will be hard. You may have to face some hard truths and become vulnerable in some difficult ways, but someday you will look back on where you were and realize just how far you've come and how much better off you are. In the words of a very wise speedrunner, you'll see that it wasn't who you were, just where you were. Because hell is not forever, and heaven is not a lie.